La Liga, of course, back this weekend. We're answering some big questions over on our website. Just a reminder, ESPN FC is presented by Xfinity. The Wi-Fi is booming. Maka apparently used to play for Real Madrid.
Is that right?
So let's start with them, shall we? Kylian Mbappe, given the number 10 shirt.
Yes.
What are you expecting from him this season that we didn't see last season?
I expect his work rate to be better. I expect his work rate and his communication with his teammates to be a lot better, because personally his numbers were excellent, weren't they? He scored 2 yesterday in a friendly match. So I don't doubt that if he stays fit, he'll score another 40 goals. But what he did, he took a lot away from Vinicius Jr., didn't he? And he took a lot away from Rodrigo. So I expect that fluidity to be better. Real Madrid to be a lot better than they were last year. Squad's a lot bigger. Everybody was injured. Dani Carvajal, Militao scored yesterday. Rodrigo scored yesterday. You know, Alaba played a part. So everybody who was injured is back. So this squad is big and it looks really strong and experienced. So I expect them to be a whole lot better than they were last year.
It's weird, Nedum, isn't it? Because if we were sat here last year and going, look, Kylian Mbappe's got to score 40 goals, yet we're going to be discussing whether or not he was a good addition to the squad. It's crazy.
Yeah. And I was going to ask you as well, Steve, in regards to, say, the new manager coming in, do you think he's going to be asking him to work hard or demanding that he does?
I think demanding, Nedum, and I think what Xabi needs, and I think what Xabi will get, and I think has already received, is the power from the president. Because in past times or previous managers, if they've had a problem with a player and they've dropped a certain player, that player will go above the manager's head and speak to the president direct. Where I think the president and the CEO have already said to Xabi, listen, you're the boss, you can control the players, you can tell them yes, no, you're on the bench, and everybody has to abide by your decisions. And I think that's the most important thing. Xabi's come out in the press on a number of occasions and said, if you don't work hard enough, you're out of the side.
Okay.
And that is a big warning, because we know, because we've seen the stats, that Kylian and Vinny Jr. and Rodrigo, when he played, did not put the work rate in. And that should be the absolute minimum when you play in a football side. Not just for Real Madrid, in a football, you know, and everybody knows, in a football side, you have to put in the work. But you have to do the work rate. That has to be the minimum, running round and trying. The rest comes on top of that.
Do you know the danger with that? And you've probably seen this throughout your career as well, and you, Shaka, and maybe not you, Dan, but when a manager says something that's very, very straight to the point, like if you do work hard, you will not play, if all of a sudden somebody feels like the exception, then you lose all the other players as well. So in those words that he mentions, like, we have to see that.
Yeah.
Because otherwise the other players will be like, well, if he's not going to do it, then why should I have to do it? And then you go back to the problems that you probably saw at the end of last season.
Well, I think they've got a real point to prove, haven't they, Madrid? Because we know last year they were poor. The forwards were not great. Last year they were talking about the next best players in the world are going to be Vinicius Jr. and Kylian Mbappe. Ballon d'Or time is now, not one of them are mentioned, or fleetingly, but not really they're mentioned. And who are mentioned? An 18-year-old who was 17 last year, Rafinha, Dembele, and they've, you know, if they want to be the best, they should take that as a personal front and say, right, we need to up our game. We need to be the ones who we've been speaking about in a year's time. And Lamine Yamal's had things to say about Kylian, celebrations, the way he's acted, etc., etc. So I think La Liga could be really tasty this year.
Obviously, we talked a lot last season about how they were missing Toni Kroos in midfield. They haven't brought in anybody else, really, to kind of solidify that position during the summer. How much of a concern is that?
They brought in three defenders. They brought in Master who's been announced today. We'll wait and see. They've got, the amount of midfielders they've got, Dan, is incredible. Someone should be able to sit in that role and play, whether it's a Tchouaméni who has to stand up, a Camavinga who has to stand up, whether Trent will go inside because Dani Carvajal will play. They've certainly got enough options. Arda Güler will play a more advanced role this year, but whether he'll take over the sort of the Luka Modric role rather than the Toni Kroos. But I think in layman's terms, no one can take over Toni Kroos' role. He was too good at what he did. Likewise with Luka Modric, someone has to make that position their own and start again. You know, Pedri's excellent, and he's the best player, he's the best midfielder in Spain at this moment in time, but someone else has to stand up against him. Whether that's Bellingham, whether that's Arda Güler, whether that's Fede Valverde who plays central, we'll wait and see.
Is there any world in which Xavi is not in charge at Christmas?
No.
You don't think so?
Why? Why would you say that?
Because I'm concerned from what we've seen already in pre-season and what we saw last season, and that he's taking over a very fractured squad. And I think expectation around Real Madrid is something that you know well. It's so high.
Yeah,
and with
but
Barcelona doing what they did last season, if you don't hit the ground running and there's already questions, you know how quickly that criticism can
yeah, but
snowball.
I think Madrid will hit the ground running.
Do you think so?
They've got Osasuna in the first game.
Right.
And they've got an away game and then Mallorca. I can't see there being a position where they're going to struggle.
But why are they all of a sudden going to click where they didn't last season?
Because they've got more bodies back in. They've got better defenders back in. They've got no injury worries.
Well, Bellingham's out obviously till October.
Yeah,
That's
he's
a
out
big
till
miss.
October. But they've got too many good players for them to struggle in this particular league.
Right.
You know, so I don't think there'll be an issue at all. They may struggle when they start playing the better teams in the latter part of the Champions League. We'll wait and see, but that's 7 or 8 months away. I can't see them struggling in the first couple of months. No chance at all. Not in La Liga, I wouldn't think, or late on in September when the Champions League starts. I wouldn't think they'd have a problem at all.
What do you think, Shaq?
I expect to Macca's point, you expect things to be tight in the first couple of months. It was last season as well. It's just with that first Clasico, and as the season starts to take shape, you hit a bump in the road. You just wonder how things are going to hold up from a Real Madrid perspective. And now to that point, you've got a new manager coming in Xabi Alonso, and as much as he's demanding of Kylian Mbappe and others, you just wonder how they're going to respond to the previous point. Because Xabi Alonso demanding Kylian Mbappe defend is not unlike what Carlo Ancelotti asked of him. It's not unlike what Luis Enrique asked of him. It's not unlike what Didier Deschamps asked of him. And none of those three very good managers were able to get him to do that. You also have the issue of Vinicius Jr., who doesn't defend either, who didn't defend with Carlo Ancelotti, even when he was favourite to win the Ballon d'Or. I know he didn't. So the question is, why does Xabi Alonso come in? All of a sudden, those two players do things that we have not seen them do in the entirety of their careers. Now, and that's where the fracture comes, not through the midfield. Yes, Toni Kroos was a miss. Yes, they have defensive replacements this season. But unless you can get a defensive shift out of those two, I just fear you're going to have the same problems. And I personally don't see it changing.
Why's Alonso got the magic wand then? The other great man.
I just think they've got better players, and I think most of the time last year, as much as we're focusing on this moment in time about Kylian Mbappe and Vinny Jr., the problems last year were in defence. If you watch the games, if you watch the early rounds of the Champions League games, it was at right back where Lucas Vazquez had to fill in, and eventually Fede Valverde went back there because they had so many problems. It was when Raul Asensio came back in and had to partner Rudiger, or Rudiger was injured and Tchouameni went back in. Ferland Mendy at left back, and then Fran Garcia at left back. They weren't good enough. They've addressed all of those issues in the summer. Dean Howson's come in, Trent's come in, Carreras has come in. So actually they've focused on that area principally, and they've sort of re-recruited Dani Carvajal, Eder Militao, David Alaba. So as far as I'm concerned, that area where they had huge problems with last year, they've effectively fixed. We'll wait and see if they have fixed it, but they brought in real quality to those areas where they struggled last year. They'll score loads of goals. Whether Kylian and Vinny and Rodrigo work together going forward is another question. They'll still score plenty of goals, but when I watched them in the Champions League lose to Milan, struggle at Dortmund, even though it was the right-back area side of the pitch, that's where they struggled. And it wasn't fair on Lucas Vazquez. They've addressed that this year, and they've strengthened considerably at the back, and I think that'll be the cornerstone, the platform for them to move forward and do well in La Liga.
And they've done that obviously with Trent, who's made the same move that you did, Liverpool to Real Madrid. If you could offer him any advice on and off the pitch, what would it be?
Well, like anybody would, learn the language, integrate with your friends, integrate with your teammates, adapt to the lifestyle, work hard. I mean, he's a
Buddha bar.
Excuse me?
Buddha bar.
What's the Buddha bar?
Buddha bar?
Apparently some sort of nightclub.
It's easy for you to say. But yeah, just the simple things. I mean, it's not rocket science, is it? And do well on the pitch. Everybody appreciates it. As much as people criticised him, he had a really good Club World Cup. He may have struggled in the first game after joining Real Madrid a week before, but so would everybody. But since then, he's been excellent. I've got no problems at all. He'll be a success.